Do you tell me? Do you wear 4 layers to go to farmers market? Is that
Yeah,
because I've
yeah.
heard rumors about that.
I'm Ukrainian, currently based in Chicago. I used to be a business consultant for about 10 years, and now I work for a software company.
Big five, right?
Mhm.
Deloitte, Accenture, PwC, and EY, and maybe somebody else, right?
Maybe.
Ernst and Young already said it. And you guys number five, or there's somebody else number five?
Oh no, you think about it as big four.
Big four.
McKinsey, BCG.
Oh, I even didn't
They
mention BCG.
McKinsey, BCG. So there are strategy consulting firms,
Uh-huh.
and there are other top tier consulting firms.
So you have strategy.
If you're thinking about management consulting, you're thinking about McKinsey, BCG, Bain.
Compare, let's say, McKinsey or working there, experience working there, maybe other companies that you have colleagues and friends, whether the work pressure, work-life balance is equal or better or worse. For example, I've heard that Deloitte is extremely difficult as far as workload. You have like 60, 70 hours a week. You have to have that many billable hours per week. Otherwise, it's kind of cutthroat environment. And if you can deliver, they're very much into revenue-driven organization, right?
Well, I'd say there are certain industries where the expectations might be somewhat different, right? Just due to the nature of work. So if you think about consulting generally, it's a more demanding job than a typical office job, right? And consulting is not the only industry that works like that. You have investment banking, PEs. They, I would say, typically would have, well, it would be typically a more challenging work environment. So when we
What is it PE?
Private equity firms.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So when we talk about work-life balance, I think that it wouldn't be fair to talk about McKinsey only, right?
Mhm.
It's like generally there.
So it's per industry.
Yeah, I would say it's industry specific.
So it's not company specific work-life balance per se.
Yes.
Okay. So where is easier, where it's harder?
Well, let's say if you work in the industry, you have your typical 8 to 5, right?
Mhm.
If you work in consulting, you may have a client that has operations globally, right? So then
Right.
it may be an expectation that you would have to join a call at, outside of your normal working hours. But then
No, it becomes your normal working hours.
Well, the norm is kind of determined by yourself, right? There is no guidance or formal requirement in McKinsey or, to my knowledge, in any other firm to work overtime. Actually, McKinsey has a lot of initiatives that are focused on creating a more balanced work-life situation. And that being said, McKinsey gives you a lot of freedom in a way. There is a motto that is called "Make Your Own McKinsey," right? So it's a very unique environment in terms of, what kind of development path you want to take in that environment. And in that way, it's different from a normal job, right? Well, normal from a job in the industry, right? Because if you go if you choose a career in the industry, right, you still think about it as a certain development path, and you make investment in developing your skills. When you think about McKinsey, it's kind of similar, but it's on a very accelerated time frame. Mm-hmm. So the amount of growth that you may experience in McKinsey within just a couple of years is tremendous. I'd say it's cannot be compared to any other place.
So would you describe it as organic growth, or it's a growth for individual who pursues growth?
It's growth that is induced by the environment, by the nature of work, and by the investment that your employer is making in your upskilling.
And you refer to growth mostly as individual professional, right? Not so much career growth.
All of it.
All of it.
Professional, personal, career growth. So McKinsey has an up and out culture, right? Just similar to many other management consulting firms, which means that there is a certain expectation that within 2 or 3 years you're going to progress to the next level.
Okay. And they introduce you to that path as kind of norm almost.
It is very well documented, and this is actually very helpful. So there's something that is called leadership development model that outlines all the dimensions and all the criteria that you have to meet to qualify for progression to the next level.
So you know ahead of time what you need to have or demonstrate to get there.
Exactly.
See, that's good for, that's what well-developed old organizations have, is that, like, I had the privilege to work in smaller consultancy firm, and I had quite often one-on-ones with my boss, not often, like once a month, right? And we had this topic, and I was trying to be like helping hand as far as growing organization, honestly, without particularly pursuing anything as far as my compensation or whatever. I was just trying to bounce ideas. And I remember he asked, like, what do you think we need to demonstrate or introduce in our small culture, small environment, that would be treated as advantage versus other employer? Like, what would make somebody go to us and stay with us rather than choose somebody else, like PwC, for example? And I realized is that, well, we don't really have a growth path. Like, we just start working, we kick ass, we work about 8 to 6 usually every day. We fly to client's location, we stay there Monday to Friday, come back, and Friday we work maybe like 2/3 of the day. But we really were missing well documented, as you pointed out, or at least verbal path to advancement. Like, what's your career path might look like? I think it was big question mark.
Right.
You know, you get hired as like DevOps engineer or what have you, and that's it. Nobody talks about next step. And I understand it's like learning for everybody, including the boss of that organization, but I think that's what was missing. How about other organizations? Have you heard how they operate in this career advancement strategy? Do they have similar outline?
I think it varies greatly, right? Especially right now when the labor market has become more fluid, right? People changing jobs more frequently in the remote work environment. So the question is really, what is the strategy of an employer in terms of retention, right? And not everybody tries to do that with monetary incentives. So I think a lot more emphasis is paid on everything else: corporate culture,
gym membership.
Yeah, gym membership. Well, I mean, in the remote environment, maybe not so much gym membership, but let's say if we're talking about someone who works in software development, right? What kind of certifications that employee would like to have, and whether this would be paid by the employer, and whether employer would have a suitable project where that skill will be put into practice, things like this. And then, coming back to the question about corporate culture, I think in the traditional industry, a lot rests on that. Right? Are there opportunities for development? Are there what kind of collaboration exists between teams? And different people look out for different things, but I think the trick really is for the employer to understand what are those non-monetary incentives that can be created. Coming back to McKinsey and the reason why they have everything so documented, right? Typically, people choose to join McKinsey to have that kind of development, accelerated development. That's why the feedback culture is very strong. The feedback protocols are very clear. It's a strengths-based feedback culture.
How do they keep documentation up to date? Because that's a constant challenge, probably by yourself when you go to organizations, consult for them, to them. they always have documentation that's out of date, like years out of date. How does McKinsey solve this challenge?
What kind of documentation we talking
I don't
about?
know how corporation works, how we perform consulting, how onboarding works, and things like that.
Mhm. Yeah, it is constantly evolving. So I would say there are principles that stay the same. There's a formal statement of mission that
Mm-hmm.
stays the same, but some nuances of the operations they're constantly being reviewed. Even in the time when I was there, I could see already changes. Like for example, strengths-based feedback culture was introduced when I was already like 2 or 3 years in McKinsey, right? And to answer your question, I think it's a combination of efforts by different people. So well, human resources, I think, looks at that on their own, but also there are so-called uh, knowledge investment projects that can look at internal operations. So that, let's say, if you have a great idea about an improvement, you can go advocate for it and then create a project out of it, and then you can create a support group. And if the idea is interesting enough, there are forums and ways to propagate that idea, and ultimately it may be
So
turned
there
into a
is an
norm.
environment that promotes you or empowers you to bring those changes to the light
Yes,
and implement them if decide to do so.
right. It's a very open environment, open to feedback, innovation, and the feedback flows up and down. This is probably the best thing. I could go and provide feedback on my boss in a very constructive way, and I will be listened to, right?
Wow, it kind of reminds the Bridgestone Associates culture, right? The what's his name, Ray Dalio, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where like honest opinion, honest feedback. Doesn't matter who you're talking to. The best idea should win rather than the role, the title you have.
Yes. I think that's a failure mode for many companies, because this kind of culture, the open culture where feedback is shared openly, reinforces the whole progress, right? As opposed to other cultures where uh, the general impression may be that people don't care, or if somebody knows that nobody's going to listen to me, then I'm just not going to speak up, right?
Right.
And we all value our time, and if the expectation is that nothing's going to come out of it anyway, why would I
Yeah.
do that?
There's no incentive, at least self fulfillment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you chose to live in Chicago. What made you to make that choice? I've heard you've seen the world, right? You've seen
Yeah.
different cities in the United States. Why Chicago?
Um,
Do you tell me? Do you wear 4 layers to go to farmers market? Is that
yeah,
because I've
yeah.
heard rumors about
No, I
that?
was there just yesterday. I did have to wear 4 layers, a scarf, and a hat, and it didn't help much. I mean, Chicago is a beautiful city. In summer, it's the best place to live in the U.S. No kidding. And
What do you like? How do you spend summer in Chicago? What do you like about it?
there's tons of things to do. You have over 20 beaches in Chicago, so the beach
Oh
culture
wow!
is very strong. Like you would go and have breakfast at
I've
the beach.
I've seen yachts and boats right
Yeah,
down the
yeah.
river, music
Yeah,
pumping.
but even if you don't have a yacht, you can just go have run by the lake. There is a bike path that is almost like 30 miles long, and it goes along the
Around the
lake.
lake, right?
Yeah, so a lot of that is connected to just the culture of spending time by the beach. But Chicago is very culturally very rich city, so there's a lot of like summer festivals, and there are various communities that have their own celebrations and festivals. So like if you actually pull up a calendar for any day, uh, especially in summer, you would see like hundreds of events. It's not possible even to track everything, starting from some concerts, performances. So you would never be bored. And when I was moving to the U.S. The last time, it was mostly for professional reasons. So I was choosing between New York and Chicago. And I spent a weekend in Chicago. It was in August, and I was sitting at Navy Pier, and it was like beautiful weather, the sun reflecting on the lake, the birds are flying. It's also a very clean city, which was very important for me. So I
was or is?
Well, I mean, thinking about that moment, right? It had an impression of very very clean city for a large city in the U.S. and culturally diverse and very comfortable to live in. So I asked myself, what else do you want?
Do you enjoy transportation or restaurant scene or club scene or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, our friends were visiting me in the first months when I moved there. So they came from California and they pulled up Yelp and they said, oh, we're going to look up a good restaurant. And what Yelp told them is that within mile radius, there were over 70 restaurants that met their filter criteria, which was a bit of a shocker for them. So yeah, in terms of restaurants, you cannot go wrong.
And transportation, you have subway, remember, or they go over, right? Over the
Sometimes
street.
It goes over, sometimes it goes down. Yeah, there's a subway line, then there are buses, express buses, and then there are regional trains.
See, like we have them too here. We have buses, we have DART, which is train line or commuter line, and then we have a train that goes from basically Dallas to Fort Worth, like Trinity train. But the difference probably with Chicago is that, I mean, I would say DART trains are pretty effective and frequent. Buses not so much, and they're quite rare. It's not like New York and Chicago where basically every given street have bus going there one way or another.
Yeah.
Here it's more like spread out and not too many routes. And even if there is a route next to you, you might wait for a bus like half an hour, sometimes even maybe 1 hour if it's out of peak hours. So that's why a lot of people rely here on transportation for personal car, right? Using personal cars. And every family probably have at least 2 cars usually. So in that regard, Chicago probably a better choice.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's very friendly.
And how? So you mentioned New York, right, as your comparison. How would that stack against New York, at your experience?
At the time when I was choosing, Chicago won because it seemed to me as a city that is cleaner, and I think it just the whole vibe of Chicago is just resonating with me.
Like culturally rich.
Yeah, look, I visited New York. I was actually with my friends in New York just the weekend before that, and I spent way too much time in traffic, waiting in lines, and it was not the single factor in making a decision. I've been to New York. I had been to New York many times before. It just, I don't know, there was just such a clear comparison, and I felt like it was the right thing to do. I don't have an Excel where I have, 25.
Don't look at me.
Well, okay, I'm not going to look at you. I've heard there are people who have Excels. And there are rumors that there are such people that make, very complicated models. For me, it was more like emotional decision. Like
you found basically yourself in that city, right?
Yeah.
Like the soul of the city resonated with you.
Yeah, it just felt right. Besides, I didn't have a vision that I would stay there for, as long as I have stayed. I thought I'm just moving for a year. I had a comfortable life in Germany before, so it seemed to be like
right. So you was making a decision basically for a year, moving from Germany. You didn't really know that you're going to stick around in States or in Chicago for much longer.
Correct.
So where you are right now with regards to Chicago, living there, is it still your number one choice? Or you consider?
Well, we headed towards winter, which always makes me second guess, but I think I can make it. Pretty much, I love it.
Have you thought about having second home somewhere?
Yeah, maybe later on.
Or maybe travel for extended period of time somewhere.
A lot of people do that. They stay in Chicago in summer and then they have some house for the winter somewhere.
Nice. So how's Dallas for you? What's your impressions?
All right. When I come here, I stay most of my time in the suburb, right?
Mm.
So if we think about downtown, uptown area, I've been here just a handful of times. It's Well, it's clear that it doesn't have as much history as Chicago, right?
Mm-hmm.
For example, or some other places. Like I was in Boston last week, and you see buildings that were built like in
Yeah,
1700s, right? So
you
it's a bit,
have Irish blood flowing through those bricks.
yeah, yeah, right. Well, I mean, a lot of history connected to anything, and they have like explanations what happened here or there. So it's kind of
Well, we have that, but we might not relate to that history though.
well, yeah, it might not be also that obvious, right? Because a lot of construction in downtown looks almost like brand new. So
Yeah.
it may provide an impression of a city that is kind of more modern, just because there are not that many historical buildings.
Yep.
And I would say it's a different kind of lifestyle. Exactly, just like you mentioned about the public transportation. I guess if you take an average person from Dallas and then you take an average person from Chicago and New York, the routine would be different, right? You would not, you know, look up where, when your next bus or train is, and you would not, do that. And like if you think about going somewhere, you're not thinking about it in terms of, I don't know, blocks, or in terms of lines that you need to take, or in terms of Uber trips. You're thinking about, which highway I need to take,
Mm.
what is the traffic situation on that highway, right? So that's like, even in terms of mobility within the city, it's a different situation. But other than that, I would say, in terms of what the city has to offer, if we, you know, uh, leave this kind of cultural thing a little bit aside, I don't think, you know, I think Dallas has plenty to offer as well. So it's a comfortable place to live, and I was flying here today, and people who were just boarding with me on the flight, they just had that conversation, how much they love Dallas, and this
Yeah.
is like the best place in the U.S. I mean, there's always a question, how much
Yeah.
have you seen of,
Right.
besides Dallas? But there are people who love it, and they just find, living here comfortable.
So you made the decision to switch from McKinsey and do something else.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about it and what moved you in that direction?
I was thinking about this mostly as exiting McKinsey, right? Because 10 years in McKinsey is a long, long time. Almost 10. I was like around nine, right? So it's almost like you feel like a dinosaur. You've seen already a lot, and um, there's high turnover,
Mm-hmm.
for good reasons, right? It cannot be compared to like other industries. We already talked about it. I think I was just reaching a point when I felt like I need some other experiences in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And
Were you missing on something in your lifestyle?
well, you know, I had clients that were located around the globe, so I traveled a lot, and feeling, connection with your home, and even at work, feeling connection with the results of your work. So consulting, and you've been a consultant yourself, like you are on a project, you produce a result, and then you kind of have to move on to the next thing. And yeah, you may have the same client, you may have that client relationship for multiple years, but it's not kind of like you fully own what you produce. And I think that sense of fulfillment and sense of
Yeah.
connection, I just,
Meaning, right?
yeah, meaning, right? Well, I mean, you can still,
You can fabricate meaning. You say, hey, this results bring me
well,
XYZ.
that's a very dangerous and a very, I would say, gray area.
No, fabricate for yourself, for your
Yes,
brain,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You can convince yourself that the amount of money you bring or whatever promotion or whatever comes with success for your client is the gratification for your work. But I think the nature of human being, no, it's a fake, and it wants actual results of your work in terms of improvement of what you've been working on.
Right. Yeah, I think that is true. A lot of people find motivation in the nature of the projects, right? Because some of the projects are really like transformational for the communities, for the businesses, and it's not just like a marketing pitch or anything like that. It really is so, right? Let's say one of my most recent projects there, right? Just before I left, and there was a public announcement about that in Financial Times. I think I can talk about it. I was part of a large study where there were multiple teams, and we were working with a mining company, and there was some pretty cool work in terms of digitizing operations and applying machine learning models to optimize the production process at that mine. And the outcome of that was that in terms of the output, the increase in output was equivalent to creating another mine. And just think about what that means for the environment, what that means
So
for the whole
close to
business.
twofold, basically.
Well, they had like 5 or 6 mines of that caliber, I would say. So that's like creating one more.
Right.
But setting up a mine, it's a quite complex operation, and it has impact on environment, of course. So it just you think about applying some technology, some smart people, and some will of the owner to actually change the business. So yeah, a lot of people find motivation in that, like the kind of the nature of the thing that I'm driving. But then the question about the connection to the work results still doesn't go away, right? You cannot.
You cannot say it was yours. Is that what you're saying?
You don't feel like that sometimes, right? Because you kind of have to move on to your next thing, and you leave it in the hands of the client, and that's it. So I think by doing that continuously over multiple years, I think I just felt like I need some
burn you, right?
I need something else. I need some other experience. You've had it, you've had situations yourself when you create an idea and when you execute on that idea, and that idea is fully yours. You feel that entrepreneurial spirit. So that part was missing, I think, for me. And generally, 10 years is a big part of your life. You already want to do something different. So it was a good time for me to exit, except that the universe decided otherwise, and it was right before COVID. So I envisioned for myself that that'd be a year when I'm going to travel, do all the stuff I've been missing out on. And in the end, it was just like...
How much of, before you continue, and we're not going to forget about that, but how much of the free time you actually had in your typical work week, including all the work-related activities, how much time for yourself you actually had?
The weekend.
Full weekend?
So if this is in the middle of the project, right, I had my own routine, and during the week there wasn't much time for, because usually I was away, right? So there wasn't much time for socializing. I mean, I could still use that time to connect with the family, but it was not really true free time, right? So a day and a half on the weekend, because Saturday morning I usually catch up on sleep and rest from travel and stuff like that.
Right.
But then, you still have generous free time, generous, time off, and that's when I, did other things for myself, like, I don't know, traveled, connected with family, stuff like that.
So back to your story, yeah.
It just like on and off in a way, right? And I try to sequence it that way so that I maintain energy throughout the year, because you have a demanded project and you have 2 weeks of break in between, and then you kind of recover and then you go on. And I was just chatting with a coworker of mine today about this kind of reflections on building your path in life generally, not only like career paths, but like
as individual.
Yeah, as individual, what is important, because we're all humans. And
so tell us what is important from your part, like top 3, top 5, I guess, qualities or vision for life. Like, how would you describe it from your perspective?
I'll first talk about the change that happened in me, and then we can talk about...
I keep on switching subject.
Right, I'm trying to maintain some,
so structured
continuity.
Can I deal with you?
In the well, I mean, some training.
I'm joking.
I think that experience helped me to gain some like inward-looking perspective and really, ask myself questions that are important. What is important for me? Kind of have a lot of like deep self-reflections and generally slow down. And it's kind of an interesting thing because when you are in a high-paced, high-performance environment, you always hear stuff like this. So you need work-life balance and you need to slow down. And you think I got it. But you really don't. That's the thing, right? Because your mind is kind of it operates on a
It got used to the high pace.
yeah. It's already tuned to operate in a certain way, right? And you can take an effort to slow down. You can take a few days off, but it's not that kind of slow down that is meant when people tell you need to figure out how to have a more balanced life or I mean I think it applies to not only to me but to many other people, those who especially in the zone focus on work, right? And you tell them, hey, just take a little bit of rest, and they say yes, but do they really get what you're trying to convey? So I think that kind of thing happened to me, and just having this forced slow down helped me a lot, and kind of helped me reset the perspective about what is important. And in the end, it's not so much about a race, right? Because life is eventually not that long, and you kind of run it, and if you run it fast and just drop that at the end, it's not a really pretty life in my view, right? So taking steps, if you're thinking that you need to run, then slowing down and taking step left or right may seem as a waste of time. While in reality, if you think about what your life is going to look like, it's not really a waste of time. It's what makes the whole journey different.
So you're saying taking a step left and right from the main path allows you to look from side perspective of how where you're going, right?
Reset. Yeah, I think I told you before that one of the things I started doing is that every weekend I choose a coffee place, and then I just sit there for an hour or two and do nothing. It may sound like I'm a lazy person, but it's actually a very productive time for me eventually, because like I do nothing, I do people watching, I do like reflection.
And it's hard, right?
It's hard to push yourself not to do anything. Yes.
but I like how you said it's kind of different way of thinking almost. Like you're not doing anything, and you have no really thoughts flowing from through your head. But I don't think you're actually not doing anything. I think you kind of acquire an almost new skill to think deeper or something, right? Like it's almost like you find a way to archive data better, or just have a different view on life. It's almost subconscious in that moment. You sit there for an hour or two, and I think you kind of like Keanu Reeves in the Matrix movie, right? They load them new program how to fight, and he fights. I think that's the moments where we load new skill in ourselves, like how to be more wise in choices, and how to look at life, the values in life differently. And you actually need that slow, no thinking time to think.
I guess so, except that it takes more time to load, right? But another way to look at it is how you engage with information, right? So in fast-paced environments, you're already kind of geared to process a lot of information, right? And that ultimately, that skill, I think you carry it on into your regular life. And you engage in a lot of situations and you process a lot. But I think because of the pace of procession and pace of change, you stay kind of on the surface. If you force yourself to sit down and just do nothing, I think what that ultimately leads you to is that you may not process as much information, but if you, let's say there's an idea and you start holding on to it, you kind of go deeper. and you take and you go almost to another level in that like understanding of what's
completeness of it,
completeness,
and also,
rather than checking in with it and running
Right.
to the next idea,
and you also see how it interacts with other aspects of life, or
you gain a different vision in that way.
yeah. So a couple of things I remember throughout you've been talking. Well, back to consulting real quick. I developed this idea how to compare it to a sushi chef in a sushi restaurant. So consultant is basically a sushi chef. You just put sushis in a conveyor belt, and new sushi and new sushi and new sushi. So you don't really develop a relationship with your products to a degree that you feel like, oh, this is me, this is my baby, right? You just conveyor belt, and you just deliver your job. And sure, I mean, people might like it, and you help them, and they might even be grateful. But at the end of the day, you're not part of the product at the end of the day. So yeah, I also can relate to that. That was a big reason why I decided to exit consulting, at least for the time being, foreseeable future. So you self-reflected, and at this moment in life for you, what did you realize? What matters to you, and maybe what is missing, or what are you pursuing?
At this point in life, I think for me, what has become key is to have deeper sense of harmony in aspects of life, right? In my relationships and my view of the world, it's kind of like rebuilding it and making sure it all kind of matches and sticks, and that I think that unlocks more energy, right? Because then that energy is not consumed with some conflicts or something that is like you're trying to fix something, right? If you're more wholesome and calm as individual, you're kind of able to channel that energy in other ways, right?
So you don't spend as much time on self-conflicting thoughts and self-criticism.
Yeah. So kind of, it's connected to the balance, like having balance, but I think it's deeper than that, because harmony is something that brings also satisfaction, right?
So it's kind of calmness in day-to-day life, and satisfaction with your immediate surrounding, I guess, right?
Yeah. It's kind of I think it stems from reassessment of where how your path works. Are you running for something? Are you running for something immediate? Are you running for something that's 3 or 5 years down the road? Or are you aware of what's around you today, what's inside you today, and how to where your next step leads you? So kind of harmony, awareness, and this is already probably sounds weird from ex-consultant, right? So things like awareness, harmony. I guess others would just talk about some numbers, KPIs. I want to have this, that, and that. So that is the shift, right? Because for me right now, I'm just maybe talking about something that is in abstract terms, but it really is kind of a new set of values for me, and it works. Right?
Is there anything missing right now for you that you still want to add to your wholeness, to be whole?
There's always something missing, but I think it just the path and getting on that path is pretty important. And again, I would say I'm just starting that transition for myself, and maybe there are things that I don't know, and I'll figure it out tomorrow.
How long is the list of things you want to work on?
Again, I don't have a list in my head. I don't have like, these are 15 things that I want to fix next year. No, it just probably a moment, well, a running list of realizations and constant reassessment in a way, right? And becoming more and more aware of what is now more important versus something that I considered like 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
Okay, So how do you go about it to actually, I guess, implement it or become better at it? So if you have, it seems like continuous realizations that flow in through your head, do you try to track them and focus on one at a time, or you just learn the skill of be aware of those?
I I track them. I have my records, writings, but I don't do that for the sake of tracking. You see, when you think about this, you think about an action, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I need to take this action to have this result. Right now, I'm thinking more about doing the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of um, act rather than action. I don't know the right way to explain it, but it's not so much about, these are 5 things, 5 steps, five, you know, uh, performance indicators that I want to hit. No, I think it's for me, and we probably chatted about this before. Um, I've always had struggle applying all these consulting principles in personal life. I think they, to some extent, um, shouldn't be applied. But for some people, it works, and then I know people who have I know other people who have excels in their lives, and yeah, somebody's just feels like if they have a plan, everything works out. I think right now I'm more in the exploration phase, and for me, it's more important to keep going and kind of keep exploring rather than
Okay, so
knowing the plan.
learning more about what you like, what you dislike,
Yeah,
and how whether you want to dip your toes in it, right, and
yeah,
make your own new routine or something.
right.
I think the last question I want to touch on is how what's your kind of perception of the idea of investing, and how do you where do you see you want to apply your capital, for example, your savings? Do you want them to grow? You want them to just be stable? And if you decide to do investment, what that might look like? Because you have a variety of options, as all of us probably have. How do you look at that whole thing?
I think um, wealth management is a topic that has been completely overlooked in the places where we come from.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been, I think, a blind spot for me for a while. Something that I think a lot of people uh, that not only I would say generally in many other places outside of the US, right? A lot of people don't think about wealth management that much, right? I think it's something for very rich, right? Those people who have large portfolio and they need some wealth management fund or something like,
What was the anecdote? Something like, I read the news and I wanted to buy dollars. So I did. I bought $1.
But that's the thing, right? That these days with all the online investment platforms and fractional shares, you can start investing.
Mm-hmm.
The question is about truly understanding your attitude towards risk and having the right strategy. But if you have that attitude that should have led you to invest and you're not doing that just because of ignorance, that is a problem. And that was my problem for a while, which is kind of funny because my degree is in economics and I can tell you exactly how it should work and all the logic of the market and everything behind that. I just uh, because that was never like a big topic for me. I never for a long time I haven't looked at it. I've changed that, and my attitude to this is very positive because if we're talking about financial well-being, yeah, you can go and find a job that pays you more, or you can figure out other ways to grow your wealth, and this is maybe equally lucrative. The question again is about your risk attitude, but again, there are different investment instruments with different risk reward perspective. So generally, I would encourage everybody to look into this. And yeah, I think it should be part of education from early on. Because I don't think, especially with the technology that we have today, it's no longer exclusive to a certain group of people, right? In a way, and besides the way I think the business works today with startups and startups funding and everything, just like if you have a great idea, it wouldn't hurt to know how to fund it, right?
Right. Yeah. If you would been asked to give an advice about like life in general, or career path, or relationship, or other things, could you talk about those? Maybe like top 5 things that you think younger generations should really benefit from if they follow these or don't do these mistakes. Top 5 things.
Oh wow, you're putting me on the spot.
Well, you've been here for an hour already.
Well, the conversation was so far about my experience, which is just easier to narrate. So, as I understand, the question is the advice for younger generation, younger people.
Yeah, somebody who, I mean, we all have our own advantages, disadvantages, understanding of life. And at the moment you are right now, what were the top 5, I guess, biggest realizations for you, or things that you should really try to avoid, mistakes?
Okay, I'll give it a shot. So, number one, be curious. I think one thing that led me in life is curiosity. The questions pop up in my head, and I love exploring, figuring out the answers, understanding how things work, rather than just taking it on a face value. And from curiosity,
So you would challenge something, right?
Yes, challenge something and be curious about something. Don't just accept things the way they're communicated to you. If you're curious about how something works, invest the time and figure it out. Especially these days, and I think that's what makes it different for the newer generation, right? When I was a kid, I think the key problem was to find where the information is available.
Mm-hmm.
You probably remember going to the library and looking at the books that are available, and sometimes the book is not available. Sometimes you don't even have the right teacher or mentor who can explain to you what give you the answer. These days, all your answers are there. The question is how to figure out the right source of information, and how to store the right information. So this, I think, being overwhelmed with information is a feature of the current generation.
Yep.
And sorting out through information, filtering the right information should be kind of part of that curiosity, right? When you have a question and you type it in Google or wherever, right? Understanding what exactly is the content that you're consuming. So that was number one.
So one is be curious.
Be curious.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, act, like do stuff, right? Because a lot of people have great ideas, but they hesitate way too much, right? And sometimes you just need to take risks and figure out ways to do things. And sometimes you don't know the whole journey, but you know the first or second step, right? And again, I've been talking about this just recently with some friends of mine that about the diversity in the U.S. and how do people really have chances, right? And my take on that is, yeah, of course there are some issues about certain groups, but generally I also see people who they just stumble and then reinforce the idea, this is not for me. I'm not I'm not cut out for that. This is for someone else, and they just give up way too early in the process. So that was number two. Number three.
So how would we summarize it in a couple of words? Number two, act.
Act. Yeah.
Okay. Despite adversity, your stories, your background.
Yeah,
Yep.
just do it.
Here we go.
All right. Number 3 would be look for the right mentors.
That's good.
And these days, I think there are also a lot of opportunities, all sorts of forums and groups and podcasts, and people started sharing information. I think that was not available for us back in the day.
Just books?
Yeah, it's just books, and some of those books were written, 20 years ago, and you kind of have to figure out everything yourself. And these days, you can find the right mentors, you can find the right opportunities. You don't even have to pay for them
Yeah, a lot of times don't.
Yeah, they're all sorts of uh, free learning opportunities online, and that is just fantastic. So connect with mentors, and
that's number 3.
Yeah.
So find a good mentor. Maybe if you have more the positive one advice, it's fine, but maybe you also can remember some mistakes that people shouldn't do.
I would say, we all are humans and we all make mistakes sometimes. And I think personally, I've taken some mistakes way too hard on myself.
And blame yourself for mistakes.
Yeah, like blaming, overanalyzing, trying to figure out, why this happened and what should I do later on, and kind of, questioning my skills,
self-critic.
Yeah, self-criticism, a lot of that. And I would say life is moving way too fast for that. So there may be benefits in doing that, but you'll also lose by not acting. Coming back to my number 2, right? So it's gonna sound harsh, but yeah, you make a mistake, and suck it up, do a little bit of analysis, and just move on, right? No need to dwell on it for way too long.
Agree with that.
And the other thing, which is probably connected to that, it's probably both positive and negative. You need to have the right group of supporters, and cherish that, because there will always be people who will want to cast some doubts about your actions, maybe even some blunt haters. But having those who would actually help you in the right moment is like, if I recall some pivotal moments in my life related to change the place of living, change my occupation, I really had great supporters who sometimes just kicked me in the ass and said, the opportunity is right in front of you, you just have to go and grab it. So it's different from mentorship, though. Mentorship is just kind of helping you, guide you, right? But you need to take action, and sometimes the support group is important for that. Not everybody has that, source and will all the time to go and do that. So that was number 5.
Wow. Anything else you want to close up with? But otherwise, it was tremendously insightful.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Until next time.